You knew the dinner was going wrong before anyone raised their voice. It was not one dramatic moment. It was the way your friend kept refilling everyone's water instead of sitting down. It was the joke her partner made that sounded harmless but landed like a warning. It was the 2 seconds of silence before the table started laughing. By dessert, everyone was still being polite. But your body had been bracing for an argument for nearly an hour. On the way home, someone said, "That was a nice evening." You wondered whether you had attended the same dinner. If experiences like this follow you everywhere, people may call you unusually perceptive. They may praise your intuition. They may even say they wish they could read people as quickly as you do. What they rarely understand is that noticing more does not always mean knowing more. And it certainly does not mean suffering less. Sometimes it means carrying 10 possible explanations for a moment everyone else has already forgotten. Sometimes it means detecting a change without knowing whether it is important. Sometimes it means becoming responsible for an atmosphere you did not create. Today, we are not going to romanticize that experience as a mysterious power. We are going to examine 4 different roles that highly observant people often fall into. These roles can look similar from the outside, but each one is driven by a different need. One searches the room for emotional weather. One stores patterns across months and years. One translates feelings for everyone else. And one edits their own personality to prevent rejection. Understanding which role you play matters, because the solution is not the same for all 4. Welcome back. I'm Apex, and this is the psychology of people who notice what everyone else seems to miss. Before we explore the 4 roles, we need to make one distinction that can protect your relationships. Observation is not the same as explanation. You can correctly notice that someone's energy changed when a certain name was mentioned. That does not mean you automatically know why. You can notice that your manager became unusually formal in an email. That does not prove you are about to lose your job. You can notice that your partner placed their phone face down during dinner. That action is real. The motive you attach to it may not be. Perceptive minds are often excellent at detecting difference. They are not immune to making mistakes about meaning. This is where awareness can quietly become projection. The brain notices a blank space. Then memory, fear, and expectation rush in to complete the picture. Because the completed picture arrived quickly, it feels like intuition. Sometimes it is useful intuition. Sometimes it is an old wound wearing the clothes of insight. Keep that distinction in mind as we meet the first role. The first role is the atmosphere reader. This person does not enter a room and simply join the conversation. Their nervous system checks the emotional temperature first. They notice who is speaking too loudly. They notice who has stopped making eye contact. They notice when the host keeps cleaning, because sitting still would reveal how uncomfortable they feel. At a weekly Teams meeting, the atmosphere reader hears that the supervisor's "good morning" sounds flatter than usual. Nobody else reacts, but they immediately become more careful. They shorten their update. They remove the small joke they plan to make. They wait to ask for vacation time. The supervisor may simply have slept badly. But the atmosphere reader's body has already adjusted to a threat that was never confirmed. This person is often misunderstood as shy, tense, or overly serious. In reality, they may be processing more social information than anyone else in the room. While other people are following the conversation, they are also monitoring the conversation around the conversation. Who interrupted whom? Whose idea was ignored until someone more senior repeated it? Why did the energy drop when that subject appeared? This sensitivity can make them excellent facilitators, teachers, interviewers, and friends. They often know when someone needs an invitation to speak. They can sense when humor would release tension. They can recognize when a meeting has become unproductive before the agenda admits it. But the same sensitivity becomes painful when every atmosphere is treated as a personal instruction. Someone is uncomfortable, so they must become more agreeable. Someone is disappointed, so they must fix the evening. Someone is quiet, so they must have done something wrong. The atmosphere reader does not merely notice weather. They begin trying to control the climate. That is an impossible job. The second role is the pattern archivist. This person does not necessarily react strongly in the moment. They collect details over time. They remember that a friend only becomes affectionate before asking for help. They remember that a colleague supports new ideas in public but blocks them in private. They remember that every family holiday follows the same sequence of jokes, criticism, silence, and forced reconciliation. Other people see isolated events. The pattern archivist sees a series. Imagine a group of friends planning a weekend in Barcelona, Amsterdam, or Chicago. One person volunteers to book the apartment. Everyone else is relieved. The pattern archivist remembers the last 3 trips. This is the same person who chose the most expensive option, ignored the budget, and later acted offended when people questioned the cost. So the archivist asks to see the options before anyone pays. The group calls them controlling. 2 weeks later, the booking reveals extra charges no one discussed. Moments like this teach the archivist to trust patterns more than promises. And often, that instinct protects them. Consistency is more informative than one polished apology. Repeated behavior deserves more weight than a beautifully worded explanation. But there is a danger hidden inside a good memory. An archive can become a courtroom. Every mistake becomes evidence for a case that never closes. The person who disappointed you at 25 may still be judged by that version of themselves at 32. A new partner may be punished for a pattern created by an old one. A late reply may be filed beside every abandonment you have ever experienced. The pattern archivist is not wrong to respect history. They become trapped when history is no longer allowed to receive new information. Patterns should guide questions. They should not erase the possibility of change. The third role is the emotional translator. This person understands what people are trying to say before they can say it clearly. At a family lunch, one sibling says, "It doesn't matter where we spend Christmas." The translator hears the disappointment beneath the sentence. During a project review, a teammate says, "I can handle the extra work." The translator notices the exhausted pause before the answer. When 2 friends misunderstand each other on WhatsApp, the translator explains what each person probably meant. They soften the sharp words. They provide the missing context. They prevent a small conflict from becoming a permanent rupture. People love having an emotional translator nearby. They make complicated people easier to understand. They can turn anger into fear, distance into overwhelm, and awkwardness into language. But translators are often expected to work without rest. In a family, they become the person who tells dad why his daughter stopped calling. Then they tell the daughter why dad never learned to apologize. At work, they privately reassure the junior employee after the director gives careless feedback. Then they explain to the director why the team has lost motivation. In a relationship, they interpret their partner's moods so generously that their own hurt is continually postponed. They understand everyone's reasons. And because every harmful behavior has a reason, they struggle to decide when a reason is no longer an excuse. This is the translator's central confusion. Understanding why someone behaves badly does not require you to keep accepting the behavior. Empathy can explain a wound. It cannot make the wound harmless. When the translator forgets this, compassion becomes a door with no lock. Everyone can enter. Almost nobody asks what it costs the person holding it open. The fourth role is the self-editor. This person uses observation to modify themselves in real time. They are constantly reviewing how they are being received. Was that story too long? Did that opinion sound arrogant? Was the message too direct? Did the other person's smile disappear because of something they said? At a networking event, the self-editor meets 3 different people and becomes 3 slightly different versions of themselves. With the confident executive, they become concise and ambitious. With the anxious newcomer, they become warm and reassuring. With the sarcastic group by the bar, they hide their sincerity behind jokes. This ability often looks like charisma. The self-editor can fit almost anywhere. They know how to avoid stepping on emotional landmines. They understand what each audience rewards. But belonging everywhere can create the strange feeling of being known nowhere. After years of adjustment, their preferences become difficult to hear. They choose the restaurant everyone else likes. They agree that the film was great because disagreement would change the mood. They say they do not mind staying late because the team already seems stressed. They call themselves flexible. Sometimes they are, but sometimes flexibility is fear that has learned excellent manners. The self-editor's deepest question is not, "Do people like me?" It is, "Would they still like me if I stopped adjusting?" Most highly perceptive people move between these 4 roles. You may read the atmosphere at work, archive patterns in love, translate emotions in your family, and edit yourself around new people. The roles are not diagnoses. They are strategies. And strategies are usually built for a reason. Some people begin with a naturally sensitive temperament. They notice subtle changes in tone, pace, expression, and energy. Other people develop the same alertness in unpredictable environments. They grew up learning that safety depended on reading an adult quickly. Was the parent coming home cheerful or angry? Was tonight a night for questions or a night for silence? Would honesty be welcomed or punished? The child became observant because observation reduced uncertainty. Years later, the environment may be safer, but the strategy continues searching for the old emergency. This leads to our channel's central view of high perception. The problem is rarely the amount of information you notice. The problem begins when information passes through three false equations. The first false equation is change equals danger. Your friend sounds different, so the friendship must be in trouble. Your manager becomes brief, so your position must be at risk. Your partner needs an evening alone, so love must be disappearing. Change deserves attention. It does not always deserve alarm. The second false equation is discomfort equals responsibility. Someone feels awkward, so you must rescue the conversation. Your mother feels disappointed, so you must reverse your decision. A coworker is overwhelmed, so you must take part of their workload. You are allowed to notice discomfort without volunteering to absorb it. The third false equation is pattern equals proof. A behavior resembles something painful from your past, so you assume the ending will also be the same. This equation feels intelligent because it uses experience. But a resemblance is not a verdict. Wisdom uses history while still checking the present. So what can you do when your mind detects more than it can comfortably process? Instead of trying to become less observant, pass each signal through 4 filters. The first filter is raw data. Describe only what a camera or microphone could record. She replied with 3 words instead of her usual paragraph. He looked at the door twice while I was speaking. The room became quiet after the budget was mentioned. Do not add motive yet. This simple discipline prevents your fear from hiding inside your description. The second filter is possible stories. Force your mind to produce at least 3 explanations. Perhaps your friend is upset with you. Perhaps they are exhausted. Perhaps they are answering between appointments. The goal is not to choose the most comforting explanation. The goal is to remember that your first explanation is not the only one available. The third filter is ownership. Ask, does this belong to me? If your colleague is nervous before presenting, you may offer encouragement. You do not have to regulate their entire afternoon. If 2 relatives are quietly angry with each other, you do not have to become their messenger. If a friend keeps choosing a relationship you distrust, you can state your concern once without turning their life into your investigation. Care is an offer. Control is an assignment you give yourself. Learn the difference. The fourth filter is proportionate action. Choose the smallest response that respects both the signal and the uncertainty. Ask 1 direct question. Set 1 clear boundary. Wait for 1 more piece of evidence. Leave 1 situation that repeatedly violates your values. You do not need to ignore your perception. You also do not need to build an entire case from a raised eyebrow. Consider a friend who cancels your Sunday hike for the 2nd time. The old response might be to replay every recent message and decide they no longer value you. The filtered response sounds different. The raw data is that they canceled twice. The possible stories include stress, avoidance, illness, or a changing friendship. The ownership question reminds you that you cannot manage their honesty for them. The proportionate action is to say, I've noticed our plans keep falling through, and I want to check whether something has changed. That response is neither naive nor accusatory. It creates room for reality to answer. Now consider the team member who repeatedly praises your idea in meetings but undermines it afterward. Compassion does not require pretending the pattern is harmless. You document the decisions. You confirm responsibilities in writing. You reduce your dependence on that person. You respond to behavior without claiming to know their entire psychology. That is mature perception. It is specific enough to protect you and humble enough to remain accurate. There is another practice the 4 roles often resist. You must allow other people to misunderstand you occasionally. The atmosphere reader must sometimes let a room remain awkward. The pattern archivist must sometimes ask a question instead of silently building a case. The emotional translator must sometimes refuse to explain one adult to another. The self-editor must sometimes send the honest message without polishing away its personality. This will feel uncomfortable at first. People who benefited from your constant adjustment may call the change selfish. That does not prove the boundary is wrong. It may only prove the old arrangement was convenient for them. You also need places where your mind is not performing social analysis. Not every quiet moment should be filled with another podcast, feed, or conversation. Cook without watching a screen. Walk the dog without reviewing the day. Take 10 minutes after your commute before responding to anyone at home. Let your senses encounter something that does not require interpretation. Warm water, cold air, the rhythm of your footsteps, the sound of a kettle reaching a boil. This is not an attempt to empty the mind. It is a way of giving attention a simpler job. Over time, something important begins to change. You still notice the pause before an answer. You still detect the energy shift in a meeting. You still remember the patterns others dismiss. But you no longer treat every signal as a command. You let observations remain observations until more information arrives. You let adults carry feelings that belong to them. You let your own personality stay in the room even when it creates a little friction. Your awareness becomes less dramatic and more dependable. This is where perception develops into discernment. Discernment is not seeing a secret motive behind everyone's behavior. It is knowing the limits of what you can see. It knows when a pattern deserves a boundary. It knows when a strange moment deserves a question. And it knows when an uncomfortable feeling deserves nothing more than time. Think of your mind as a professional audio mixing desk. It receives many channels at once. Words are one channel. Tone is another. Facial expression, memory, context, and your own fear each arrive on separate tracks. Your suffering begins when every channel is pushed to maximum volume. A tired voice becomes as loud as a confession. An old memory becomes as loud as present evidence. Someone else's discomfort becomes louder than your own needs. The answer is not to smash the equipment or mute the entire world. The answer is to learn where the sliders belong. Turn evidence up. Turn certainty down when facts are missing. Lower the volume of responsibility for emotions you did not create. Raise the channel carrying your own body, preferences, and limits. That is not becoming less sensitive. It is learning to produce a clearer signal. If you recognize yourself in these 4 roles, ask which strategy runs your life most often. Are you the atmosphere reader who manages every room? The pattern archivist who cannot stop building connections? The emotional translator who understands everyone except themselves? Or the self-editor who is accepted by many people but fully known by very few? You may be more than one, but identifying the role shows you where your energy is disappearing. Your perception is not a demand to expose every mask. It is not a contract requiring you to prevent every disappointment. It is information. And information becomes wisdom only after it has passed through humility, evidence, and choice. Leave the role you recognize most in the comments. If you have a personal example, share what your mind noticed and what the situation actually turned out to mean. That difference may help someone else separate intuition from fear. If this video gave language to an experience you have struggled to explain, send it to someone who is always reading the room. And subscribe for more grounded psychology about deep thinkers, sensitive minds, and the behaviors people often misunderstand. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm Apex, and I'll meet you in the next one.